So this video is made so that anybody that's already purchased my hologram blueprint pack can quickly learn how to get started and create holograms of their own with it. If you haven't purchased but you're interested, take a look in the description of the video below. There should be a link to it. In the video, we're going to be going through some of the different features that are included in the pack, how to integrate your meshes with the hologram blueprints, how to quickly customize your holograms to get the look that you want, and how to record and integrate sound into them. And if you guys end up liking the video, please don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment. It'll really help me out. Alright, let's get started. So for this tutorial, I'm going to be using a mesh that I've already kind of modeled, UV'd, and baked some super basic animation into in 3D Studio Max. But you know, if you guys wanted to do the same and you want to have animation in yours where, you know, little parts of it are kind of moving around, rotating and whatever, you could just go look up rigid body animation tutorials in, you know, whatever 3D software you're using. In terms of the actual mesh that you'd like to make, you know, the sky is the limit. Like, you could do all sorts of holograms with this. Basically, any mesh that you want to import and turn into a hologram, you can. If it has animation, if it doesn't, it's still going to work. But for this tutorial, I already have a mesh that I've imported as skeletal. So I've baked some super basic animation into it, pretty much just a 360-degree rotation on the middle section of the hologram. You'll see, if you're stumped about how you can go about animating, importing skeletal meshes into Unreal, I'll be creating another tutorial for that shortly in, you know, a few weeks from the release date of this one. So yeah, so before we get started, I'm just going to show you guys exactly kind of what we're aiming for and what type of mesh we're going to be making. So I'm just going to click play just to show you. So you can see what type of mesh it is. It's pretty basic. It's literally like a plane, a few planes that are kind of pulled down, their verts are pulled down, and then kind of just unwrap the UVs so that they're just wrapped cylindrically around these different kind of elements. So if I just open up the skeletal mesh and show you guys, this is basically the mesh without materials. Like, you can see it's super basic. Like, I've kind of, you know, UV'd it in 3D Studio Max so that, you know, my different words and lettering and everything are kind of all kind of wrapped around on different planes, and then I kind of have my little design thing in the middle, right? The first thing you're going to want to do is create a material instance. So, you know, you start off with this hologram master materials v1. If you go to, where is it? Master materials and material instances, and then inside of a folder in here named like hologram, you kind of have all your main master material instances here. So the ones that you're going to want to really pay attention to are all of these guys right here. I wouldn't pay attention to the localized point fade. That's basically just the beam of light that shoots out, which it's kind of the same one for all of them. And, you know, if you wanted to change all of the holograms, the way that that material is kind of functioning and looking, you would do it in here, right? And then there's the video one here, which it actually it's capable of playing beams of light that kind of follow the colors of the video. But you know, for a big screen like this, I wouldn't want to use that because, you know, those can actually get quite expensive, right? So like, I've kind of optimized them so that they fade when you get far enough away from them. But the way that these beams of light actually work is it's not actually light. It's just taking the mesh and it's like doing a duplicate of the mesh and then using world position offset to kind of shift all the vertices back to the origin point at the hologram stand in the blueprint, right? So it's a bit of a hack, but I think it really works if you're subtle enough with it, right? So, and you know, because it's stretching all that stuff, depending on the poly count of your mesh, you might get a lot of overdraw, you might not. And that's part of the reason why I have them like fade out at a distance, right? Just because, you know, you always want to minimize that overdraw as much as possible. I couldn't really find a good way of getting a beam of light that kind of followed an object that was moving around and changing shape. So that seemed like the best way of doing it. So you have all these material instances here, you know, a bunch of them do a bunch of different things. They're kind of made for different situations, right? So like if you're doing like a simple kind of plane, you know, where it's just kind of rotating and you have like a really basic texture with some text on it, you would use that one, plane. If you're doing one that doesn't have a normal map on it, like see like this right here, it doesn't have a normal map on it, I'd probably use that. There's this thing called backface cull, so you can see it right here. So if you use backface cull, it basically hides all of the back faces of the hologram, because like, you know, this is an additive texture, so it's light. It always brightens up the frame, you know, normally, and that's why you can see like the video and the, you know, the stars and everything behind the characters, because it's additive, right? And those areas are kind of dark, so the darker your texture is, the more you can actually see through it. This backface cull basically makes it so that if you turn backface cull on, then you won't be able to see the back of the hologram, right? If it doesn't say no backface cull, it kind of implies that it has it on these four at least. So you know, for something like this where you have a character that has a normal map and you want backface cull, you would do this guy right here, you know, normal map. If you had a normal map but you still wanted to see the back of your hologram, you'd use this one, you know, so you have no backface cull. So yeah, do you know what, like, you don't really need to know a lot of this stuff. I would honestly just create your material instances and then kind of parent them to these guys and kind of just see what works and experiment. And like this is what we want, right? So it's simple, it's text. So I'm just going to go with this type plane right here, and I'm going to create a material instance for it. I'm just going to call it, like, you know, demo material. And I'm just going to drag it to my demo folder in here. And then I'm going to create or open up my skeletal mesh, which, you know, it could be skeletal, it could be a static mesh, it could be a plane for a video file, like however you want to do it, right? This one, I want to apply my material to it. And actually here, I'm just going to grab the texture from the one that I already did and just copy that into my demo folder. So the texture, it's super basic. I did it in Photoshop in like 10 minutes. You know, it could be masks, it could be default. You could, in the actual material instance, you could put a channel mask in there and then choose what channel you want it to be, red, green, blue, however you've kind of set it up inside of your texture. But yeah, for this one, I'm just going to toss this in my base emissive texture, right? And then I'm going to go back to my static mesh just so I can kind of see, and instantly you kind of have like a pretty solid looking hologram, right? And you got to keep in mind, this hologram's meant to be seen from the bottom. It's not meant to be seen from the top. So I didn't actually put it two-sided, but if you really wanted to make it two-sided, you could go in here and, you know, two-sided in the children or the child instance. And then if I drag that, here, that's not the right one. I'm just going to drag my new one that I just made into the world. I'm just going to scale it up so you guys can see, and pull it over here so it's a bit more visible. But yeah, it's two-sided, so you can kind of see both, right? If you've made an animation for it, you can plug that in the blueprint. You know, I made an animation for this. It's a skeletal mesh, right? It's not static. So the next step would be to choose what blueprint you want for your hologram. So if I go to hologram blueprints, you have three. You have skeletal, static, and video player. So for this one, we're just going to be covering skeletal. Skeletal and static are basically the same. The video player is, you know, just creating a material and then mapping it to the plane that already exists inside of the blueprint, right? But so here, I'm just going to create a child blueprint class from my skeletal master blueprint right here. And then I'm just going to drag that into my new folder that we made. Demo. And then, you know, you could rename it BP underscore demo mesh underscore 01. Have a better naming convention than me. I'll leave that up to you guys though. So let's open that. And as soon as you open it, because it's skeletal, it kind of comes with this, you know, character just to kind of visually let you know that you're using the skeletal version of the blueprint, right? But don't worry, like I've kind of set it up in the blueprint so that when you switch the mesh, it won't ever be loading that, right? So we just want to grab our skeletal mesh right here and just make sure you select this this section in the corner, just so you get all the kind of base blueprint elements. You know, if you started selecting inside of here, you know, it gets a bit complicated, but I would always, in the children blueprints, always just select up here first. And then we're just gonna replace the skeletal mesh with the new one that we made, right? Let's compile it. And here we can just delete this guy and replace him with the new blueprint that we just made. Okay. It's pretty basic right now. Like if we hit play, let's just take a look. Oh, wait. Sorry, I want to simulate so I'm not loading my character. So it's pretty basic. Just by default, your hologram will actually rotate at kind of, you know, a slow pace. And, you know, now that we have our blueprint here, you kind of have all these settings in here. But, you know, if you're going to change the settings on the blueprint, it's kind of better if you, instead of doing them like in the world, in your level like this, you know, selecting it, going in here and changing these settings, it's kind of better if you actually just open the blueprint and then, you know, make sure you select this part up here and then you can tweak a bunch of stuff, right? So if I go here, you have all these different settings. It can get a bit complicated, but, you know, it's just to kind of give you guys enough control to be able to do whatever you want. But in terms of that rotation that I was talking about, where is it? Let's see if I can find it. Yeah, so, you know, if you go to hologram parameters, you have like hologram rotation speed. It's by default, it's always set to 0.5. So like if you didn't want rotation, you just set that to 0. But, you know, they always look better when they kind of move a bit. So, and, you know, most of these settings should be pretty good, like right out of the board. But, you know, like let's say you wanted to change the color of the hologram, you could go in here. Let's make, you know, this is kind of supposed to be a spa. So, you know, maybe like green or blue would kind of work. I got my wife to record some dialogue for the audio on it, which is supposed to be kind of sexy. So I'm going to throw that in there as well. Let's see here. I'm actually just going to grab that from my other folder, Innovate. And I'm just going to copy those, bring them in here. And you can just click play. You know, if you're importing audio for these, it's super easy. If you have a mic, I just use Audacity. So it's a free program. You can download it. It's super, super easy. Here, give it 2 seconds. Let's load this up. So yeah, as soon as you get it loaded up, if you have a mic, just, you know, go here, choose your mic, and then, you know, you can record. You could say something like, "Hello, my name's Lincoln Hughes. I am an artist." Okay. You know, so that's super basic. Let's play it. "Hello, my name is Lincoln Hughes. I am an artist." And, you know, in Audacity, you have a bunch of different stuff you could do. You know, you could reduce your noise, you know, if you want a crystal clear voice, but I don't actually need that. Like, I'm just going to select it all. And, you know, I want it to seem like, you know, I'm in a kind of open space and, you know, in a city or something like that. So I'm just going to go to Effect, Reverb, and then I'm going to hit OK. And let's play that. "Hello, my name is Lincoln Hughes. I am an artist." You know, I'm going to do the reverb effect again, though, because, you know, I want it to seem like I'm, you know, really, really out there. "Hello, my name is Lincoln Hughes. I am an artist." Okay, so then you can export that and if you're Unreal, export as WAV, and you could just say like demo audio, and then let's go back here, demo audio, go to Unreal, and you could just import that. Oh, come on. And
hello, my name is Lincoln Hughes. I am an artist.
Okay, so we have our audio, but I actually like the audio that my wife did a bit better. So I just kind of wanted to show you guys how you could quickly kind of create sounds and import them. It's super easy once you've done it a couple times. I'm actually just going to grab my sound file, and then inside of my blueprint there's this section called hologram audio, and you could just slip that in there. And make sure if you plan on using audio with this, you check use audio, because if it's not checked, it'll actually destroy the audio components in the blueprint for optimization. So, and here you also have this use second audio clip. So kind of one thing I found when I was working on it is that if you have only one sound clip, it's like it gets very, very repetitive very quickly. So I put in this option to add a second audio clip, and I just recorded this one as well.
Rest and relax with companions of all types waiting to fulfill your every desire. Visit Enervate Spa now. Rest and relax.
Oh, yeah, so yeah, that's my wife, and the first one.
Refresh your mind with a stay.
That's a really good friend of mine named Bianca. I kind of wanted to go with the cyberpunk vibe for it. It's a pretty basic design, but like I kind of wanted it to be kind of seedy, almost like it's a kind of dirty spa where all sorts of dark things happen. So yeah, I just quickly wrote some dialogue for that, and the second one, just throw that in there. Make sure second audio clip is on. You can change the volume intensity and change a few settings in here to make sure that the sound is kind of working. Attenuation max fall off. That's like how far you'll be able to hear the sound. And then you have this loop delay, which basically makes it so that when your sounds are finished playing, it'll wait this amount of time in seconds before replaying again. So if you really want to minimize the repetition of the sound, you can really tweak those values. So now that I've kind of plugged that in, let's just compile, and I'm just going to hit play just so we can kind of demo it.
Refresh your mind with a stay at the Enervate Spa. Come and join us now.
Okay, so that's pretty cool, but there's kind of one thing that's really bothering. There's a couple things that are bothering me about it. I think the emissive intensity is a bit too much. It's maybe could just be pulled back a little bit. So inside of my hologram parameters, I can just turn down emissive intensity here. I'm just gonna pull this out so you guys can see. Turn down the emissive intensity, maybe like 3, just so that it's a bit more legible and less bloomy. Like it's a hologram, you want it to be bloomy, but yeah, I think there's kind of a fine line between not being able to understand what the words are saying and it looking nice, right? So another thing is if you select your hologram, there's this kind of little gizmo here. It's like a 3D widget. If I grab that, I can just lift it and move the hologram wherever I want, right? And if you look here really, really quickly, you can actually see that I've kind of set up the skeletal mesh of the hologram stand that I painstakingly learned Substance Painter again on, because I haven't used it in months, so I was having a hard time remembering how to do everything in it. But yeah, so like I basically made it so it rotates wherever you want. Inside of the blueprint, if you scroll down, there's this kind of hologram stand section where if you wanted to, you could change the mesh to whatever you want. Just basically make the kind of the same mesh, if I open that really quick, just so you can kind of see what's going on. It's, it's a pretty basic mesh. It just has like a sphere on the top and, a base. And then, the the eye of it is wide enough where, you know, the light beam, depending on the angle and the width of the hologram, like the light beam is always going to be able to be wide enough here where it doesn't look bad. Like the light beam doesn't cut through the mesh. So so if you're planning on making a light beam for it, you could easily do that. Just make sure that your top is facing north, like it's facing upwards, and that your mesh or your bone, whatever you want to call it, is named eye. Because inside of my skeleton for this and inside of the blueprint, it needs to be named eye, or else, you know, the alignment of it kind of looking at things, it won't actually work, because all of the code that's in the blueprint is set up so that the name of the bone that looks at something has to be named eye. You have a bunch of other settings, like if you wanted to change the emissive intensity of the light beams, you could say like 1, 0.5, 0.2, 0.1, however you want to do it. I usually find it's kind of better to be more subtle with it. And there's also kind of a nice little thing I added in here. I didn't want to go too crazy with actual lights because, you know, lights are just so expensive if they're used inappropriately. So what I kind of thought was that, I'd give you a bit of control over the lighting for it. So here, I'm just going to put it on the ground so you guys can kind of see what's going on. So if I grab this, if I go to hologram light inside of my blueprint, there's a bunch of different settings here. You can, turn the light on. The light basically inherits the color from these colors inside of your blueprint, right? So you can choose between either one of them. So if I go here, if I say use emissive tint for 1 for light color, that's on by default, so it's blue. But if I turn that off, it switches to the pink, right? So it's always going to kind of match your hologram, right? And by default, the light basically just rests inside of the stand right here, and it's a big omni, right? Like you can see it right here. It's got, oh wait, here, let me grab it. Yeah, if I go here, it's just a big ass omni, right? So, depending on how you, or what the needs of your project were, and, optimization and whatnot, you could play around with the attenuation radius. You could change it to a static, stationary, whatever you want, right? If you were really worried about performance, you could keep the attenuation radius really low. And by default, and actually, sorry, I didn't even put an option in here because it's a point light, but you can't turn cast shadow on it, unfortunately. Like movable cast shadow point lights are just the devil in modern games. So I just didn't even put that in as an option, and just kind of figured if you're really desperate for a light inside of your hologram that's super custom, you can go in and add it yourself, right? But in the point light, I also, for optimization, like went in there and changed the max rendering distance. So I think it's at like 6,000 units or something like that. It just fades to nothing. You can see it, it's gone, right? But it's a pretty like subtle transition. Like unless you're like really blasting your light in your blueprint, you just won't even notice it. So there's a few settings in here that you can tweak as well. Like let's say you had an animation that you wanted to add on your hologram, which we actually do. So I'm just going to open that really quick so you can kind of see. Yeah, so I did it super, super basic. It's doing a 360. You could do whatever you want with this, You can have like as many bones as you want in your skeletal mesh. Yeah, there's a bunch of stuff you could do. I kind of just wanted to see what you guys would come up with, to be honest. Like I had already kind of made a bunch and I was satisfied with them. So yeah, I'd be really interested to see what you guys end up doing with it. But if I go here, I could just plug that animation directly in my blueprint. So if we compile and then hit play.
Refresh your mind with a stay at the Enervate Spa. Come and join us now.
Okay, so that's cool. So the sound is kind of working and the animation works now. You have like a couple things in here, like you could uncheck looping animation. Let's just see what it does. See, it kind of completes the animation and then it stops, right? So depending on how you wanted to play around with it, you know, like let's say you had a character moving around and doing something and then he finishes in a pose, you could turn that looping off, right? There's also this thing called randomize the timeline of the animation. So like I kind of put that on by default, but like let's say here, let's just lift this up so you guys can see it a bit better. And I'm just going to duplicate the blueprint so you have two of them right next to each other. This randomize that timeline of the animation, it basically like just kind of delays the animation of your blueprint by like kind of 5 seconds, or after like after a random number between 0 and 5 seconds, it'll just restart the hologram. Yeah, so if I hit play, let's take a look. So it's pretty subtle on this one, I think. Yeah, it's
Refresh your mind with a stay
it's
at
not
the
animated
innervate
enough
spa.
for you to really notice. Actually, just to kind of show you what's going on, let's do it with this guy because it has a bit more kind of complex animation. So you're gonna kind of see a little bit more what's going on with that randomized timeline of that animation.
Welcome to Eris Industries.
Here,
Refresh your mind with a stay at the innervate
it
spa.
offsets it.
Refresh
by
your mind with
second
a stay
move.
now.
So it's like you're not gonna have two of the exact same holograms kind of just duplicates of one another. It just kind of adds a bit of variety to the movement of the scene, right? Depending on how you use your hologram, you might have a few bugs with it, right? And you know, I kind of threw a few little things in here that you guys can use to tweak. So depending on how far away your hologram is from the actual beam or from the actual stand, you might get bugs. Like, oh, yeah, there you go. See that? So what's happening is, you know how you guys remember how I told you that this hologram is basically with the light beam, it's getting stretched all the way to the origin point of the blueprint. So the bounding volume is basically this big, right? And because the bounding volume isn't actually representative of the whole hologram right now, when I look away from the hologram, the bounding volume is getting occluded, so it's making the mesh disappear. So the way that you can fix that is you can just go into your light beam bound scale, and actually I would leave this by default in the blueprint, and you know, something like this you'd want to do it on a case-by-case instance. So in here you could actually edit it directly in the world. Just because, you know, if you increase this bound scale, it basically makes it so that the light beam won't occlude properly. So you know, as I told you before, it can get quite expensive. So you want that to be able to occlude as much as possible. So in this situation, let's increase that and just kind of see what it does. So I'm just going to start with 5. Oh, yeah, see, I'm still getting it. So let's say like 8. You know, you could play with the number as much as you want. I kind of wanted you guys to have the option at least, right? And here's another bug right here. It's like most of the bugs that you're going to encounter then when you do these really long beams where the hologram is like really, really far away from the origin point, right? What you can do to fix that, see how it like kind of just appears and reappears? Like normally in these ones that I've kind of tweaked already, like the hologram just fades to nothing slowly and then the mesh disappears, right? So, but you kind of have to iron out that transition to make it so that it fades properly. So there's a couple of numbers here. So there's this thing, it's called light beam max draw distance. And that's basically how far away it'll render. So as soon as you get past 7,000, which is basically 70 meters, then the mesh will just like disappear. But it's disappearing from the origin point, right? Which is right here for the actual mesh. So, you know, that's why it kind of gets confused sometimes. Yeah, like, so if I'm really, really far, I have to really increase that max draw distance, right? So let's just bring that back a little bit because that's a bit intense. So what you could do is you could select it and, let's see if we're getting it. Yeah, see how it kind of just, that's not that bad. Yeah, you still kind of just appears. So let's increase that, 8,000. Yeah, see how it kind of fades in now? But like, you could increase that a bit more, 9,000. You just kind of got to find that sweet spot once you've placed your hologram to make that light beam kind of work properly, right? You have the light beam material fade distance. Like, let's say, you really, 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 for some reason, wanted to be able to see the beam from really far away. You could grab it and you could change that fade distance. Let's just say like 100 meters, kind of go crazy with it. That's basically the distance at which the material will fade to nothing. So you kind of got to pair the two of these together, right? And make them work on a case-by-case basis, depending on how far your hologram is away from the origin, right? So you're usually going to want this light beam max draw distance to be at least 1,000 or 2,000 more than the material fade distance for it to kind of work properly. So I'm just going to start with like 11,000 and increase. Yeah, so that's pretty good. All right. Yeah, so let's hit play and just check it out.
Refresh your mind with a stay at the enervate. Refresh your mind with a stay at the enervate spa. Now, come and join us. Now.
Yeah. See, I have two of the exact same audio files playing, so the same one's playing from this one. So another thing you could do is you could actually make this a lot bigger because it's really, really small right now. So, I'm just going to scale it. You could say like 5, 10. Let's just hit play and kind of put it up.
Welcome to Eris Industries.
Yeah, so
Here,
that's cool.
you'll be able to find our latest.
And a kind of trick that I found out with this type of hologram in particular, where it's kind of a spotlight beaming up into the air with an ad. What you could do that's kind of a little trick is you could grab the animation, which is super basic. It's that kind of circular thing right here. You could just open that up, and I kind of want it to spin instead of just rotating circular. I'm just going to actually offset the animation on that. So if I just go here, just grab my animation, import translation, just say like 500 maybe, and then re-import your animation. So I'm just offsetting it, right? So normally in the blueprint, you know how you typically kind of have that default rotation that I talked about before, where it just kind of slowly spins around in a 360. Because I offset the animation, it's actually gonna rotate around the origin, which is now offset from us offsetting our animation. So if I play, see how it kind of moves around like a big kind of spotlight from the area.
Refresh your mind with a stay at the enervate spa.
I'm gonna grab my blueprint once more, and I think there's still a few kind of little things that we could do. It's a spa. Let's change this to more of kind of a serene color, maybe like a green. Pink kind of goes with the kind of sexiness that we were aiming for it, but I don't know, whatever. Let's just leave it. You also like here, if, for some reason the light beam is just too expensive, what you could do is you could fiddle with those distances here and have them, the hologram show up a lot closer to the origin point, right? So like a lot lower of a distance, you could try like 2,000. So, but it always looks nicer with the light beam, right? So you could turn that off if you wanted, just as an option. yeah, you also kind of have this world position offset intensity. So, yeah, in here you can actually add some pretty intense looking wobbly effects to it, right? Let's go back there. Say like just 10, just to kind of show you what it's doing. But I usually find like kind of the default value is pretty good, or like upping it to like 2 or 3 kind of thing should be good. Like you always want to be able to read the words on it, right? And just to kind of show you guys what's going on in the material a little bit, if I scroll this open, like I would highly recommend using the default settings for like almost everything. But like just keep in mind that like a lot of the settings in these material instances, they're actually already being referenced inside of the blueprint, right? So if you're tweaking the settings in here and then you realize it's not working, it's not changing anything, it's probably because you haven't changed the setting in the blueprint, right? But there's a few settings in here that the blueprint doesn't reference that you can still kind of control, right? So like you could change, the Fresnel intensity. So like that's like where it kind of transitions between the two colors, depending on your kind of normals, right? So you could play around with those a bit. Like I'm not going to go over like every single setting in here. There's a lot of stuff that you can do. Yeah, like you can change the bump offset. Like if I go here, you can kind of see that it's like 3 layers that kind of weave in and out on each other. And if I go to my bump offset, you could change like your height amount. You could say like -5. So it uses like a sine wave to basically go up and then down over a period of time, right? And you can add distortion. You can I would just highly advise like just go and play with it and see what kind of works. Like that's kind of cool. Yeah, I think that's probably a bit intense. It's like you kind of got to walk a fine line between like your hologram being legible, like being understandable and visibly like I could see what it's saying, versus like the amount of the amount of distortion that you want on it, right? Yeah, maybe 5 is too much. Let's do like -2. Like just leave that. Yeah, and here you have all these kind of depth fade options. I would recommend just kind of playing around with them. They're pretty subtle, and they can be expensive. So, unless you really kind of want to get really deep into it, I would just kind of leave those alone. You can play with your flicker settings. You can kind of make it turn on and off depending on the time. You can add more clouds to it. I think I'm already kind of referencing the clouds inside of the blueprint though, but I think that the only setting that the blueprint is actually referencing is cloud visibility. So see how like I change the value here and it doesn't change in the world because this is the blueprint, right? But so yeah, if I scroll down, you have a secondary opacity mask option where you can kind of like overlay like a pattern over top of your mesh. You can kind of see it like right here, right? So you could turn that on and kind of make your own material with that. I only actually used it on the TV, and then like down here you could here I'm just gonna full screen this so you guys can kind of see what's going on with the hologram. There's a bunch of settings for the screen lines. You could say like, so like by default you kind of have these small lines going through, kind of all multiplying together, but then you have a big line that goes through, right? And it kind of just adds that graph feeling to that repetitive graph that we're looking for with the hologram. So if I make that 5, you can kind of see it going a lot more, right? Like you can change the size of the small ones, the size of the big ones, how much they affect the distortion in it, and the size of the small ones, the speed of the small ones. You can change the texture that you're using for the lines or the small lines. So voila, we have our hologram. By now, you should have a pretty good understanding of how you can import meshes, tweak the materials, play around with the settings inside of the specific blueprint that you've chosen, depending on whether or not it was static or skeletal. In my next video, I'm going to be going over importing videos. Thanks a lot for watching, and if you liked the video, please don't forget to like, subscribe, comment, and hit that notification bell. Cheers.